Announce Rachel Rosenfelt, our moderator of this keynote that we've been looking forward to since we started planning this year. Rachel is the Associate Director of the Creative Publishing and Critical Journalism Master's Program at the New School for Social Research. That's a new program that Rachel has been a part of making, but how we know Rachel, how the committee knows Rachel, she is the co-founder and co-publisher of The New Inquiry, and a lot of people who have spoken at this event and the committee have been really involved with The New Inquiry. It's been an important publication, and it's a real honor to have Rachel moderating this last keynote panel. So I'm going to hand it off to Rachel to present this panel, but thank you for doing this. Thank you.
Thanks, Nathan. When Nathan texted me asking me to moderate this, he said, I'm literally quoting your text, you would, the moderator, kind of play part of the audience member who doesn't know anything about Russian politics. So I'll try really hard to convey that persona. But we have two real experts here on the panel. So first I'll introduce Vasily Gatov. Vasily is a Russian media researcher and author with over 30 years of practice in newspaper, agency, and broadcast journalism, as well as media management and futurism. He is a visiting fellow at the USC Annenberg Center on Communication, Leadership, and Policy. And Adrian Chen is a reporter for The New Yorker. He is a board member of The New Inquiry, and he is also the co-director of a short documentary called The Moderators, which is coming out on Friday from Field of Vision. So check Adrian's Twitter for that in a week, a little under a week.
Friday.
All right. So I guess just to start things off, you two have a really great rapport, you know each other really well, and I think it would be interesting for everyone to find out how you met and just the genesis story of your relationship.
Yes. Well, no, we've known each other for a while now. I think I first contacted Vasily in 2014, or maybe, probably 2014. I was working on a story about online Russian trolling and propaganda, which was something that the entire world was not yet talking about. And there really wasn't a lot out there that was kind of reliable. There was, I wasn't even really sure of how big of a phenomenon it was in Russia. It sounded kind of outlandish that, this was actually a thing that people would hire, Russians to leave kind of fake comments on live journal accounts and social media and things. But my friend, who is a reporter at BuzzFeed, recommended that I talk to Vasily because Vasily had done a lot of research on kind of Russian trolls back in kind of 2013, 2012, when they were first coming up in the Russian internet. And so we had a pretty good conversation about that. And I think really filled me in on kind of the extent to which this kind of internet propaganda is a real, legitimate tactic that they use in Russia. And then we've continued to talk, and I think as what I've really appreciated is that you, unlike a lot of, I think, people who are kind of commenting on Russian propaganda and Russian internet trolls, you worked in the Russian media, you were Russian, and have a lot of firsthand experience, and I've found it extremely useful to talk to you about that.
Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Adrian. I just want to add that when Adrian called me, we spoke for about 4 hours, and I was walking in the courtyard. It was so interesting, so engaging, and I'm really happy to know him because he's an absolutely brilliant writer and researcher. I just want to kind of summarize my experience here, that I was working for a large Russian news agency at the moment as director for innovation, and we discovered an interesting phenomenon of mass following of Twitter accounts, live journal accounts, and so on, where the population of audience had been jumping for thousands a day without any reasonable any reason for that, because there was no content that could have been viral, or there was no endorsements from popular accounts and so on. And then we started to analyze these newcomers, and then we realized that these newcomers are actually artificial entities, and that those artificial entities are controlled because they do certain actions at a certain time, and then they started to comment, actually, because they created a script attached to kind of a traditional botnet software that is used, for example, to phish credit card numbers, or the one which is used to discover the reliability of websites, which kind of demonstrate kind of DDoS attacks of different scale. And then finally we realized it is being used as a political tool, because for example, it was used to inflate the audience, to demonstrate that the audience of Russian president account is bigger than any other audience in the country. And Dmitry Medvedev, who was president at this time, was really disappointed discovering that his Twitter account is mostly followed by bots. So when we made this research public in sort of in spring of 2012, it was already going for about 2 years. I think it was the first time when this subject actually emerged, that there is a political use of botnets and kind of trolling. Well, trolling was in a very early stage, but I mean, we already discovered it.
So, I mean, I want to keep with you, Vasily, because you've been around the block a couple of times in this. So you have a 30-year history, as your bio says, just looking at the media. You've worked in different organizations. You know the people that are involved in what, when we talk about this, you know, Russian intelligence or Russian media, you know exactly who we're talking about. But also in that 30-year period, the internet happened. So I would love to hear kind of chronologically from your perspective how Russia and the internet have, evolved and developed over the last 30 years to the point at which you discovered this bot thing.
Well, technically, the emergence of internet in Russia is a perfect confirmation of American meddling into Russian internal affairs. Because public internet has been brought to Russia by George Soros. This was his joint venture with some Russian physicists from Kurchatov Institute called Savam Teleport, that became the primary provider of internet services in Russia sometime 1986, just after Chernobyl. And I think the first time I've used email was about this same time, probably like late 1986. I became a permanent internet user from 1991. It was a dial-up, also hooked to the same network. Probably Soros was reading all our emails, subverting Russians into liberal democracy. But generally, as mostly everywhere except the United States, internet has been developing as a activist platform, as partisan media. Partisan, not in terms of it is politically partisan, but I mean, when you wanted to start your own site, you don't have to ask anyone, you don't have to register, and so on. And because Soviet Union ceased to exist in 1991, nobody cared at all. So for probably first 10 years from 1990 to 2000, internet was a very brave, funny, developing place, which created some of great Russian companies, actually, like Yandex, the only remaining competitor to Google in Europe, like Mail.ru, a huge Russian, it was started like a email service, but then it just emerged into a huge media organization and services provider. Most of the people who created that were my friends. Some of them were schoolmates and so on. So I've been I've been developing my knowledge together with them. And then somehow in early days of the first decade of this century, Russian government had discovered the power of internet. And it's a very particular moment when it happened. It was 2002. It was a terrorist attack in Moscow when Chechen fighters had captured about 1,000 hostages at the theater at Dubrovka. And because the government's, well, I would say, with consent from journalists, suspended the coverage to a very, very limited scale. I mean, it's just only reporting the formalities of anti-terrorist operation. LiveJournal had became a major platform for distributing news, and they just discovered it. And since then, Russian government started to find means to control, or at least to be aware what's happening there. And because Russia has pretty good computational linguistic school and cryptology school, I mean, they quite fast had found the tools and means how to operate it and how to play their own role. And at a certain moment, it evolved in things like the agency, whom Adrian described. It developed into a range of Russian hackers of all types who are famous in cracking into emails, banks, and security systems. And it created a huge chunk of people who fight them, like Kaspersky Antivirus and Kaspersky Security. You can think about them whatever. I mean, he definitely was educated at the KGB school, but they do great work of sort of protecting people's computers from invasions and so on. So that's the way how the story developed. And now, we see that we discussed that at the moment when one of the major narratives is about that Russian hacked DNC, and then Russians kind of were meddling into American political discourse with some evilish tools that, well, then you try to be critical on that, and you don't find any of these tools. And, or at least you don't find them so far.
So Adrian, I want you to, you mentioned, Vasily, the agency article, which is, I think, the first that a lot of us found out about this Russian troll farm. So I guess, do you want to just pick up the narrative from the point of the bots to the present date and your own research?
Yeah, so I guess I first became aware of, the kind of online propaganda in Russia and the kind of, state efforts to control and shape the narrative through this organization called the Internet Research Agency, which I read an article in BuzzFeed, I think, in 2013 or 2014, where a bunch of emails had been leaked from this organization called the Internet Research Agency that was supposedly kind of, they called it a troll farm, and it was like this kind of notorious organization in Russian media that was being was hiring hundreds of young Russians to leave comments pro Putin, anti-opposition, like pushing the Kremlin narrative on LiveJournal, Facebook, Twitter, and somebody, some opponents of the Kremlin had hacked their emails and leaked a bunch of stuff, and suddenly this whole organization was kind of out in the open. And it turned out that they were doing some kind of trolling in the US, and so they had been, creating these fake accounts that pretended to be Americans, pretended to be, critics of the US government. And this was just kind of, a small, I think, tech story in BuzzFeed, but I was really interested in that and kind of shocked that that was happening. And so in 2014, I spent about like six or 7 months just investigating the agency. There were all of these emails that had come out, so I was able to kind of get a pretty good picture of what was going on and talk to people. I have a presentation here. I ultimately wrote this article for the New York Times Magazine, that was about the Internet Research Agency, and this is just some stats about it. It was founded in 2013. It had a budget when I was there of $4.8 million a year and 400 employees. It was supposedly run by this guy who is his nickname is like the Kremlin's chef or Putin's chef or something. He's a kind of restaurateur oligarch who is kind of a big supporter of the Kremlin and was supposedly funding this whole thing kind of to help Putin. And this was actually inside the agency here. Here's just a bunch of people leaving comments on social media. And I just wanted to do a short presentation because there's been a lot of talk about, Russian trolls. This was a big theme of the the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, that there were thousands of Russian trolls that were seeding, propaganda on the internet. And I wanted to just kind of go through some of the trolling that I found when I was investigating. And this was from basically in the emails. They leaked maybe like 3 or 4 accounts that had been run by the Internet Research Agency, and from that I was able to kind of just piece together, see who they were following, who were following them, what they were tweeting, because the way it works is all these accounts will tweet the same things, at the same time, and so if you know what kind of hashtag they're promoting, what kind of language they're using, you can kind of see, oh yeah, these are all the same, run by the same operation. And so, here's like just an example of some of the Facebook comments that these trolls were leaving. This guy, Kyle Branson, American president is a face of the great country. It represents the interest, culture, and American nation. Too bad Obama is not the right one. I just cannot. I just cannot wait for the next elections. And it was. Okay, this is Thomas Gowers. He was a really popular guy. He was very active. What the hell is wrong with our legislation? It seems like all the new reforms are focused only on making a profit for the ruling political clans, but not on the improvement of the society's life. So it's pretty easy. It was pretty easy to figure out, these guys, and they're just like commenting on every, news story. Leaving these kinds of comments. One thing that I learned quickly is that in Russia, they, instead of smiley face, they only do parentheses. So it's like instead of like a colon or parentheses, they'll just do parentheses. And the really sloppy ones would use that, as a smiley face, and very obvious. And there were like some more elaborate ones. This was I Am Ass. They created this kind of cartoon character who would leave these comments like hashtag Democrats vainly trying to preserve their hashtag president from impeachment and jail, hashtag impeach Obama. And they even made these like little memes saving Barack Obama with the little ass character here. It was like a kind of creative agency as well as, a promotion agency. They had illustrators, they had people who were very skilled at like Photoshop, and that's what they used to kind of create some of these like fake disasters on social media that they were trying to, it seemed, convince people that these disasters were happening just through Twitter and social media. And so the one that I found in my research was September 11th, 2014, where a bunch of people started tweeting about this explosion in Centerville, Louisiana. And this is a tweet from, thousands that were sent that day, kind of claiming that there was this huge explosion. They made these fake CNN pages, that seemed to report on it. And they even made some videos. I don't know if this will play. So this was like a video that they were spreading that was supposedly somebody watching TV as ISIS took responsibility. And I don't know if you can't hear it, but there's even some like voice, some really bad acting being like, what the hell is going on here? And this was just like, yeah, they were spreading this, as if this was kind of proof that that ISIS had claimed responsibility for it. And yeah, that was kind of the most impressive things that they did. There was another hoax where they said there's Ebola outbreak in Atlanta. You can see that they kind of would jump on these other popular hashtags to try to make it go viral. Some bad news. One more Ebola infected arrived in Atlanta these days. What a shame. And this one also, so here's just a whole bunch of, different tweets about the supposed outbreak. They came up with this fake name of Yata Kire, who was supposedly this nurse from Nigeria, I think. It was a very elaborate backstory. And they also made a video here, which was, supposedly the victim coming in to the airport. And this was like, just posted as if like, yeah, look, somebody caught the victim coming in. And you can't hear the sound, but they were playing Beyonce in the background to I think 7-Eleven had just come out, so they were like playing that. And there's even a little logo from the Atlanta airport here. So it was a very elaborate operation that was going on there. And I think that's...
Seems like the best job in media you could have.
Yeah, so
for the agency,
those were the kinds of things that I had found during my investigation, and I wrote a very, very long story about it in the New York Times Magazine that came out in 2015, and that was kind of maybe 6 months before the campaign really took off, and a year before trolling and Russian propaganda became such a huge thing. And so it's been kind of surreal to watch it go from this kind of weird phenomenon that I was just obsessed with to now being like the number one political issue.
Sorry, just helping you out there
Sure.
with that. Okay, so you went on like a I don't know if it's a rant or whatever. You had a run on Twitter a few days ago talking about just how nobody had found any concrete proof that like everyone was accusing everyone else of being a Russian hacker. And I guess I'm just interested in this, like I actually hadn't realized how little, truly how little proof there was for all of this stuff. I thought there was more than your own research and like a few other things, but it turns out not so. So I'm just wondering what you both think about basically why has Russia's use of the internet or the Russian trolls become the defining anxiety of this moment?
Well, I can just give a little more context about that rant, and that was that somebody had written an article. It was right after the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing where Clint Watts, this Russia expert and cyber war dude, was like, Russia used kind of Bernie supporters to spread propaganda. And it was a kind of, I read his testimony, and this was the kind of thing that kind of really annoys me because, it's just this general thing and with no kind of specifics behind it, just saying that because they were advancing these kind of like anti-Clinton narratives, or because they were, kind of saying things that Russian propaganda also said, he was implying that they were part of this tool in this massive Russian propaganda campaign. But so this blogger took that and then said, look, turns out a lot of the Bernie bros who were harassing people during the campaign were like Russian trolls. And that just got me even more annoyed because it was just making this leap. And I guess one thing that I've been trying to harp on again and again in this whole discussion is my article is often used to kind of back this idea up that there's a huge amount of Russian trolls, that you can never tell if somebody is a Russian propagandist, is being run out of St. Petersburg. If they're critical of the U.S., they might be a Russian troll. If they're critical of Hillary Clinton, they might be a troll. And I guess my point was that in my piece, I went, and kind of was able to link all of these very specific accounts to this building in St. Petersburg through, leaked emails, through kind of assembling this network of Twitter bots and trolls who were kind of, engaged in these very specific campaigns to spread this hashtag or that video or whatever. But they were all, connected to this one organization. And everything else that has come out about this, usually has the format of saying, okay, this thing on the internet happened. It's bad. It's weird. It seems to be, maybe Russians would be interested in pushing this narrative. And then number two is like Russian trolls are a thing. Like here's this article in the New York Times Magazine that's like, look, here they're using deception and pretending to be Americans. And then they go to step three and it's like, so it's probably like Russian trolls that did this weird thing. And I guess nobody really takes the has been able to, and I don't know if it's for lack of trying or what, to actually try to connect these specific events to some kind of specific operation or building or person or whatever, just like Vasily was able to, I think, in your investigations into Russian bots in the Russian internet, kind of connected to this one well-known pro-Kremlin hacker who had a kind of reputation for doing this stuff. And so I guess my point is just that if Russian trolls are out there, if bots are out there working on behalf of, pro-Kremlin people, they should be actually run by somebody. They should be actually have some kind of infrastructure and people behind it. And that if you're just throwing out these claims that something that I don't like is happening and it's probably Russian trolls, if you're not able to at all point out even, specific tweets or accounts that you think are trolls and then say why, I just don't think that you should be like throwing around those accusations. And I think that's what a lot of this talk, specifically about kind of trolling, which I think that's a separate issue than hacking, than this other stuff. But specifically, the idea of kind of social media being used as kind of a sock puppet army has not been.
So, but given that, why is it working? Why is it dominating the imagination of everybody?
Before coming to that, I just want to add a little bit to Adrian's words. First, this infamous agency didn't fade away. I mean, it develops, it grows, it's becoming more and more media, in fact, instead of being a troll farm. And now it spans over like 30 websites in Russia. Its budget pumped up about fourfold, something like nearly $15 million was reported by Russian rbc.ru. The number of people who work there is probably now at about 1,000, but as far as troll functions are concerned, they're definitely on decline. And they started to decline since a very unsuccessful operation during the Ukrainian crisis in 2014. Because Russian trolls got absolutely nuts when MH17 happened. They were flooding all major foreign media with comments. I mean, aggressive, awful, and disgraceful. But the thing is that they were doing it in a such typically clumsy Russian way that it became very possible very fast to erect kind of a firewall for this type of language. For example, Guardian was closing their commands for like 4 days, and then they just came out, and there was none since then. So that's the first, development of this thing. But coming back to your question about why it works, this is less about Russia and Russian technology. That's about fake news as a phenomenon, which we know for quite a while. The disinformation, misinformation issue has been researched pretty seriously both on psychological level, on level of network dynamics, and on media level as well. And it's interesting how kind of emergence of the subject that which is being discussed by scientific community, academic community pretty extensively now, became quite easy to explain when you kind of take Russians out of the equation or measure Russians as everybody else, and then you just understand that it works because network dynamics works this way, because fake news as a bias, as part of cognitive bias and selective exposure, make us read what is coherent to our own views, or what makes our selection of our filter bubble more entrenched, rather than going on the opposite side and trying to figure out whether that's true or not. And also the problem is that debunking of fake news works against debunking. I mean, because you have to repeat fake news, and even if you try to explain why they're bad, what is wrong there, you still repeat the original, and people who are engaged in the political debate or are very much standing on some partisan side are just saying, well, if Snopes, I mean, I just read it recently in one of the discussions, that if Snopes debunks that it's definitely true.
I mean, there is, but like, there is a Russian intelligence, and there is like something's really happening with Russia. Something is really, I mean, and what that is precisely, we don't. I mean, I guess if you guys want to talk about that, we can. But I guess I'm more interested in thinking about, and I'm throwing this question to you, Vasily. Just that the United States has hysteria about Russia for the last century, and Russia has transformed in very complex ways throughout that entire trajectory. But now we've got Putin, and can you talk a little bit about what is unique about Putin's Russia and how this is or is not like the recreation of the Cold War, or like a new chapter in the Cold War?
Well, this is sort of a new chapter. Yeah, I mean, I would not agree. It's a new Cold War. It's an unfinished business of the Cold War in a way, but it's very different because Soviet Union was an ideological power. That's a huge difference between Russia today and Soviet Union. Soviet Union wanted to spread communism all over the world. This is a foundational idea of the revolutionary Marxism, that all the proletarians of all over the world should unite and create a communist society without capitalism and exploitation men by men. And because this is such a, or at least it was such a tremendous idea, the fight between the foundational country of global capitalism, United States, and the Soviet Union was actual. That was a territorial fight. Who controls more countries, more nations, more public spaces, and who directs them? It also was economic struggle. It also was military struggle sometimes, but primarily it was ideology against ideology. Putin has no ideology whatsoever. He's a man for whom ideology as such doesn't exist, because ideology based on some values. And Putin, after living all these years from the peak of Soviet development to modern Russia, I mean, just realized that no values exist at all. I mean, that countries, I mean, when he listens to traditional US rhetorics about we are land of free, land of opportunity, pursuit of happiness, he thinks blah, 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 blah. And, well, in fact, they invaded Iraq. they shot missiles on Yugoslavia, they did this, they did this. I mean, it's definitely called whataboutism. I mean, and they actually made made final adjustments about equality in 1968, as far as I remember. And Soviet Union had made women equal, races equal, and so on at the very 1917. So why Americans tried to teach us values, and so against instead of kind of using the Soviet playbook, ideological playbook, we will be better society and will help you build better society and so on. Russia says that nobody has right to say they're better than others, and it also mixed with a very interesting narrative that I published an article about half a year ago about that. That America humiliates other nations by its very existence. I mean, that America gains victories like in the Cold War, in the old Cold War, and then it just disgraces Soviet Union, and it never came back to us with some suggestions what we may do together. They disrespect us, they think that and that goes on and goes on and goes on year by year. When you live in this negation, persistent negation, that everything is bad, then you just one day start believing that. Because it's a little bit self-inflicting, I mean, self-damage. So I think that today he kind of created a machine. Well, I mean, this is not him actually. I mean, people who think that Putin would like it. I mean, this is not Putin planning these trolls or managing these trolls. This is somebody who thinks that Putin will think positively about him doing this for Putin. Similar about hacking. I mean, I'm really, really, really not convinced that this was a government level operation. It was not that professional. It was not that well designed. And the most important thing, it was targeted on the content of DNC servers, not the control over DNC servers. I mean, nobody said that the people who hacked the emails sought to control the servers. I mean, the real military-grade hacker would not really look into the content. It would look into administrative, I mean, I think a lot of people here understand. It will look into administrative capacity rather than content. I mean,
right, because they kind of like, they outed themselves by leaking those, right? When they could have just continued to dig further and further, yeah.
I mean, at the moment when they hacked into the server, I mean, these were the days when DNC became as sort of a headquarters of Clinton as a candidate of the party, and they were communicating with all the the Gulf servers, and allowing distribution of the phishing emails and so on, if you control administrative level. But nobody, I mean, neither CrowdStrike nor FBI said they even sought this. So that doesn't look like military-grade operation.
I wanted to pick up on something Vasily said just about this idea that, you know, this kind of constant atmosphere in Russia of, you know, the U.S. is kind of this hypocritical, right, like corrupt country with all these problems and, you know, injustices and oppression that then turns around and tries to lecture, you know, other countries, right? That's kind of one of the main narratives of this Russian propaganda, and how it kind of manifests itself in the actual propaganda is that they, you know, because it's not this ideological battle, it's kind of this cherry picking of all the kind of like divisions and flaws in the U.S. and trying to hit at that, right, and trying to inflame it or highlight it. So, when I was looking at these Russian trolls, they were very big on like police killings of African Americans, because that was showing how unjust it was in the US. They were very big on like Occupy protests because it was showing how upset people were. They really, anything that had any sense that there was like chaos in the US, they went for. And I think, that people, this idea of Russian propaganda and Russian media just kind of being very like targeted at all of the divisions in society and highlighting them and kind of trying to undermine the U.S. and tear it apart, I think really goes along with kind of this anxiety around social media as being this driver of division and of kind of filter bubbles of, making people really susceptible to propaganda in general. And I think that, you're seeing this kind of paranoia both of Russia, but also of social media and the idea that like we are being torn apart by this with the help of Russia.
Right. So and that kind of gets at the great threat of all of this, or what is genuinely concerning about these discussions are the implications for democracy in the United States, given that we can be agitated this way, given that a bot or a troll or like these people at the agency can participate in sowing these divisions. What are the implications for U.S. democracy and in this era of social media and unrest?
Well, I will move your thought back to the early days of television. One of the reasons why Senator Joseph McCarthy got popular in early 50s was because of television. He was so mad, but he was so kind of engaging in his rants against communists that television channels wanted to have them on because he was attracting audience. Today, what we see about highly partisan content is that it works as a glue, not as an attractor of the audience, but as a glue for the audiences. I mean, if you are highly partisan, your audience stays with you because it likes to listen what you say and probably go more and more to the certain side as a media. And internet provides you with a lot of unjustified, unverified opinion and facts. I mean, sort of what is called alternative facts. And then you just create. You not only create an echo chamber, you create sort of this glue catch for flies. And not only people become attached to that, but other systems that produce content. Because, when network scientists started to analyze fake news networks, they immediately found the patterns, I mean the graphs and the patterns, that thousands and thousands of attempts to create a fake news fail. But one gets viral. And it's usually because it became redistributed into kind of highly anticipating networks that wait for some fact, alternative fact to appear. And then it just blows up and this is getting everywhere. The bad thing that is happening now with the with the progressive part contemplating against Trump is the same thing that emerged in the right segment of internet and the conservative internet emerges in the progressive. And because it sometimes is kind of not only a protest, not only kind of a claim, but an action feature, that could be, I would say, that could be even more dangerous than on the right side. I mean, I don't know whether I explained myself correctly, well, clear enough, but that's what I'm thinking. I mean, usually the leftist side is more dangerous than the rightist side.
Why do you say that?
Huh?
Why do you say that?
Again, because because it addresses younger people, it addresses inequality. Inequality is a very, very powerful driver of discontent, and it also addresses people who seek action. And I'm not saying it's dangerous in terms that better not do that, but better think twice before doing that.
You mean that if those impulses were guided by kind of misinformation or propaganda or conspiracy theories, it would be worse.
Be even more dangerous. Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I think when you were talking about going back to television, I think I'll do you one better and go back to radio, because I've been reading a lot about radio in like the 30s and the 40s, when there was a lot of very similar discussions about misinformation and propaganda, and the idea that radio was kind of one of the main concerns was just that it was this mass medium that would kind of, was a one-to-many broadcasting, and was kind of just turning people into kind of passive, authoritarian subjects that were just ripe for a kind of, propagandist or somebody kind of speaking to their fears. And there was this kind of big push from a lot of kind of liberal intellectuals and journalists to kind of fight propaganda. There was this organized movement of propaganda criticism, and it was led by this group called the Institute of Propaganda Analysis.
Clyde Miller.
Yeah, Clyde Miller was a psychiatrist, I think. It was funded by Edward Filene of the department store, and they had this kind of brain trust, and they put out a bulletin every month, I think, of kind of different examples of propaganda. Here's
Actually, they were reinventing the bicycle, because Lord Ponsonby in Britain did exactly the same thing 10 years before them.
Really? Well, yeah, I mean, this is just kind of a recurring thing, this kind of idea of propaganda, about how do we fight it. And I think I read a really interesting paper about the Institute of Propaganda Analysis. There's basically they did two different things. One thing that they would do is they had these kind of guidelines, these lists of how to spot propaganda, right? And there were these kind of pithy things oh, does it appeal to your emotions? Does it, seem, I don't remember what they were, but there was, something that you might see on Twitter now, 6 ways to make sure you're not sharing fake news. And
the paper called 7 Scenes of Propaganda.
Yeah. And it was this kind of checklist mentality, and a very kind of trying to inspire this hyper skepticism and kind of suspicion of any kind of non-truth. And then there was this other kind of document that the people analyzed, which was kind of a more holistic idea of here's how to kind of train people to be, more self-aware, more kind of I guess propaganda immune citizens. And one of the more interesting tips that they had, one of the steps in this, was that you had to kind of do this really intense self-reflection of your own, analyze your own biases, your own point of view. Where is it coming from? What kinds of sources are you trusting? Why? And kind of really stepping outside of yourself and trying to kind of understand, what is important to you and why, and using that kind of self-awareness to then approach these other, maybe more malicious intending things. And I guess I see a lot of similarities in how the discussion is going about fake news, about misinformation, where on the one hand, you have this kind of hyper-skepticism, people making lists of fake news sites or misleading news sites, which one of them included the New Inquiry, right? Because it wasn't this straight down the middle thing. It was bias. It was I think it said conspiracy thinking and not
pseudoscientific.
Oh yeah,
pseudoscientific
pseudoscientific
conspiracy. It's that sounds right.
And Yeah, like you say that like it's a bad thing. But yeah, like back in the day, the propaganda critics got a lot of flack because teachers were teaching their kids these tips and tricks, and they were like, "Oh, our kids are now not believing anything. They're just like their minds are destroyed by the
Little
skepticism."
Putins,
yeah,
little nihilists.
and I think that what you're seeing is kind of in what you're talking about, this kind of like conspiracy thinking on the left, and kind of these seeing trolls anywhere that somebody deigns to offer their opinion that happens to be outside the mainstream. Is you're seeing this kind of like really, I think, destructive like hyper skepticism, when what I think we need more of is a kind of like self-reflective, kind of stepping outside of these two warring or whatever bubbles that we're in, and really trying to understand like how are we seeing the world now. And I think that is one way I think you can do that is by being very rigorous about like analyzing the sources and the kind of flow of information in a way that isn't so kind of generalizing and just spreading more paranoia.
I mean, this is the last question I'm going to ask before I give it to the audience, but I want to push back on what you both just said. Like, I mean, Adrian, to your point, maybe I'm just basic, but I feel like there is something uniquely terrifying about what the internet makes possible in terms of, augmenting voices, in terms of people actually getting to like construct the worlds around them they want. That's like self-reinforcing. Vasily, as you say, like, you're just sort of waiting for that story that reinforces what you already believe, and then it takes off. I mean, the kind of details of how social media and the internet is sort of really dystopic and terrifying from a media perspective, and uniquely so is something that I want to ask about. Through the Trump administration, what can we expect to see? Because I don't think it's going to be what you just said, Adrian. Like, is this going to get worse? Is it going to change? What's going to be happening over the next 4 years, next 10 years? Is there anything that we can do to stop it? Or is there anything we can do to manage it? And then to Vasily's point, I guess I think also maybe why I kind of want to push back against the downplaying of all of this is that I don't think it's true that the left getting in their filter bubbles about equality is more dangerous than the right getting in their circular narratives about what's turning into white supremacy and fascist thought.
I would probably try to correct me. I'm saying that if this develops simultaneously, it's not the danger that the left bubble develops and the right bubble develops, but they both develop, and they don't discuss the problem between themselves, and this creates a potential for unknown social consequences. I'm not predicting there'll be clashes on the streets, but I said that the consequences of such things are not studied. We don't know the society which we created with the digital discourse. It's not studied well.
I don't know if that was a clear. I don't know.
I don't think it. No, I don't.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's just like, I guess, just talk about where we're headed and what we can actually do about it over the course of the Trump presidency. I'll wrap it up with that. Maybe the audience can frame up a better question than that to sort of keep this conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I don't really know where we're headed. I think that I wouldn't dare to make a prediction about anything, but I do think let's see. I think that one of the things that was really underlooked, and I'm kind of trying to put together an essay about this during the campaign and during the whole hullabaloo over fake news and of misinformation, especially on Facebook, where I think it kind of turned into this idea that, you know, Facebook and, you know, algorithms are kind of sorting us into these bubbles that are making us susceptible to propaganda, right? That if something speaks to our kind of, you know, biases that are being heightened by this, it will, this is kind of leading us into this, like, you know, post-truth reality where Trump is president and lying all the time, where liberals didn't see it coming, you know, things like that. And I guess I think that much more interesting to me, because I think that just kind of gives, I guess, the designers and the structure of the platform like so much power, almost in a way like as if you were saying that if you, because of the way that radio was like spoke to you in the privacy of your own home or something, that was going to make you super susceptible to whatever thing was going to come out of the mouth of the announcer, and you were going to just turn into this zombie. And I really think that one thing that was underplayed during the debate was that, you know, this was I think the fake news debate was very clearly a kind of liberal versus conservative culture war that was kind of playing out over Facebook, and specifically over the idea of Facebook. Is it going to be a neutral arbiter, you know, like Mark Zuckerberg always says it is, which is what the conservatives kind of wanted. You know, it was very interesting that during the fake news debate, a lot of conservatives kind of took this like internet freedom, you know, being like, this is the place that we can get our voice out, right? Almost like they were the Navalny and the Russian opposition. And, you know, they kind of had this meeting with Mark Zuckerberg during the summer of last year, where I don't know if you followed this. You guys probably have followed the kind of news trending topics debate, where, you know, Gizmodo published a story that alleged that Facebook was censoring conservative topics on Facebook. That became a huge uproar in the right-wing media, forced Facebook to fire all of their people. Zuckerberg had a meeting with like all of these conservative powerhouses. And I don't know. I just think that I don't know what that means really, but I think that whole episode and the kind of struggle between like, is it a platform, is it a media company, and the fact that this has become very politicized now, where the left wants it to be a media company and the right wants it to be a platform. I think that that's really interesting, and that's going to continue to play out in really interesting ways. And that I think how Zuckerberg and how Silicon Valley reacts to these political pressures from either side is something to watch for.
I would also try not to play futurism here, because I mean, I don't know how it will work out. But I see some symptoms that probably may give a cue to what is going to happen. First, platform fragmentation grows. I mean, people use more and more different platforms to communicate. Messengers, for example, messengers were not at all at play in 2012 elections. In 2016 elections, messengers were already used as a platform for distribution. There are a new generation of messengers being tested, which is coming, which allows a broadcast platform within the messenger, like Snapchat stories, but imagine that they are specifically designed to be like your text television in the mobile, and so on and so forth. But because it's more fragmented world, and world which is more and more packed into your mobile phone, the trends would probably be corrected with localization also. Because as we live in our mobiles, we are much more glued to our local events, agenda, happenings, and so on, and they will come into our phones more and more, because the tools are being developed, the content is being developed, the concept of this local communication initiated by a device, by artificial intelligence living in your device, for example. This is all coming, and it's the next thing. As far as Facebook and Twitter and other social distribution is concerned, I think they would have very difficult time trying to figure out how to sort of to not be called manipulation fields, manipulation spaces, because all these things that Google and Facebook introduced, this fake news or disputed news buttons and so on, would be very easily used as tools of political censorship, like in Russia, for example, because we have kind of censorship authority, which, well, doesn't censor politically, but because Russia has so many restrictions in the press law. I mean, you can't write about suicide, you can't write about narcotics, you can't write about terrorism and so on and so on. What they do, I mean, the partisans, I mean, the pro-Putin, or actually not only pro-Putin, I mean, you write something on the Facebook which they dislike, and they start to report on you in thousands that you have violated Facebook agreement, and Facebook bans you, and if they ban you 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, and that's it. I mean, your audience is destroyed. So this is quite a danger, and everyone who thinks about internet freedom should be very, very, very cautious about supporting these efforts as well.
I guess I'll open it up to the audience for any questions. How does that work, Nathan? Do they?
I'll take a microphone to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So just raise your hand, and Nathan will bring you a microphone.
Well, one of our committee members actually studies Russia, and I assume he is a burning question. This is Jeremy.
Hello. I really appreciate the presentation today. My background's in Russian history. I did imperial history and peasant culture and studies. And one of the things I always noticed and thought was interesting is that every time the Tsar put a decree out, many peasants would say, "He's given us our freedom. Now we're totally free." And they would spread these rumors. And it used to drive the imperial authorities crazy because they couldn't stop it. You know, they basically would say, no, the text says this, but the oral culture of the peasants said, no, they said freedom. Okay. And they constantly mention the documents, the willfulness of peasants and the rumors. I wonder, we hear a lot about fake news in the presentation, but I never heard the word rumor. I wanted to know if you think there's a legacy with Russia because it's so entwined with dealing with issues of rumor with its population, and if that gave them an edge, and if there's any sort of similarities or dissimilarities between what fake news is and what rumors are, or what we think of as rumors.
Oh, great question. Thank you. Yes. Rumors are kind of an oral version of fake news. There was a great article a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, about rumors and urban legends in Russia, which completely showed the pattern of distribution. Of course, I mean, they were doing that on retrospective material, so it wasn't that forensic as now we have with the fake news, when we can show the graph of distribution, we can show the amplifier, we can show the source, the amplifier, the secondary amplifier, but it was done based on some declassified material from the 5th Department of KGB that was political police, and was amazing. I mean, I'll share with you this, but that it's exactly the same, but it's an oral version of the fake news.
Other questions? Oh, we have someone in the back there. In the green shirt.
Give me 1 second.
Yeah, I enjoyed the presentation a lot. I guess hearing Adrian read some of those posts on social media called to mind this part from the last Adam Curtis documentary, Hypernormalization, where he's talking about efforts to create chaos within political discourse, and this key aspect, which is that the attempt to insert chaos is itself evident, that you can read the intention behind it. Just it's not even hidden, and I'm wondering if that's intended in these efforts. Like, are we, and is it some people are reading it, and then people who are maybe less verbally, have less capacity to detect that? It's creating some kind of conflict. Is it just poorly written? I mean, how should we look at it?
Why was it so badly written?
And I guess also, I mean, are we? I guess is that a sign that we should? I don't know. That we should. I don't know if my question is making any sense.
I guess I see two parts. One, you're asking just like why are they doing it?
I guess the other thing that I was thinking about was like these new Twitter alt accounts.
Right.
And, like a lot of people are suggesting that there are these verbal tells in them that are making them clearly created by Russians.
Oh, so people
of
think
language.
those like alt, like national parks or whatever are Russian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think so yeah, I guess I did get very good at identifying the Russian trolls from reading it, because you can see it's pretty distinctive. Like, there's a very distinctive like bad English, that they're putting out there. But I don't think that alone is a very good sign, because there are plenty of non-English speakers who are not Kremlin trolls who are have weird views on Twitter. And so I think it was one thing that was a sign is that the internet research agency just wasn't very good at doing this. I mean, it was the kind of, it seemed like Vasily was saying, the sense that I got was that this was a kind of rich friend of Putin who started this organization thinking that he would, kind of show Putin, what he's made of. He decided that this would be his kind of like contribution to the cause, whatever. They were also, I think, being contracted by other parts of the government, right? Like in Russia, one thing I was really surprised by is that trolling is like something that happens. It's like, from the kind of smallest like governor to people in various ministries, they have to kind of make sure that the internet is like clean.
This is our heritage. This is the heritage of the 90s.
Yeah.
I mean, Russia had gone for a period between the moment when Soviet Union ceased to exist and like Putin came through the period of everything is possible. I mean, nothing is true and everything is possible. It was a period when the government actually didn't control the country. It was like a imitation of government. And the country was teared apart by corporations, gangs, sort of early banks and so on. And they were all fighting each other. And their major field of fight was media. And all, well, I was addressing Harvard conference on fake news, and after listening to several presentations, I said, "Feel my pain, or feel our Russian pain," because this is what we've been living for 2 decades. And is the first thing when two businessmen go into conflict, they start to publish bad rumors about each other, or
black PR,
black PR, or compromising material. Or hiring journalists to go after someone's lovers, someone's business partners, to find out whether this person was sort of bad, disgraceful, and so on. And so again, it's the heritage. I mean, Russia has been known for that for quite a while. And actually, there are some people like Paul Manafort who've been participating in that since mid-90s.
Right, he like exported PR
exported this technology.
No, I mean, I think that's one thing that's really interesting is that the troll farm, and this is really an outgrowth of the black PR industry in Russia, and the idea that every kind of politician, every operator will have their own kind of troll farm, getting out the word, controlling their aspect, and so this guy is basically a subcontractor for all sorts of various ministries, politicians, and things, and they just happen to have one contract or have one effort that was aimed at the U.S.
I think we have a question back here.
Where are you pointing?
Oh, sorry. There's a woman with a button that's shining.
With the button, huh?
The button that's shining. Sorry.
Thank you so much for this talk. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about the term that you've been using a lot, troll, and that term itself seems to be a bit of a fixation in the media right now, and why the actors that you've been talking about should be defined as trolls, and why you think there is this fixation on kind of the mythical figure of the troll right now.
Well, I called them trolls because that's what they call them in the Russian internet, and actually, like, it's very interesting. I've reported on the internet all over the world, and everywhere it's like has the word for trolls. You know, it's like this cross-cultural phenomenon, and so yeah, I think there's a very well-defined idea of like an internet troll in Russia. I don't know if it's any different. Do you think than in the U.S. like
Reddit trolls?
Yeah. What's a troll in Russian internet, you think?
Well, I would say that first this is the difference between like American understanding of trolling, which is somebody who follows you and always say something bad about you or your opinions or your operations. No, Russian trolls don't follow you.
They don't like harass you. Really.
Yeah, their method is not the personal harassment or not even the brand harassment. They did it a little bit with the mainstream media during MH17 phase of conflict, but that proved to be very wrong, and because they got suppressed. Technologically, they are easily detectable through language, through IPs, through management software, because most of these things are artificial entities. I mean, they've been created by a human, but they operated by a software, and their goal is to create a white jam, like to jam certain things or amplify certain things. I understand you mean you're a very young person and you don't remember the Cold War. During the Cold War, United States have been broadcasting persistently onto Soviet bloc with Radio Liberty, Radio Free Europe, Voice of America, and Soviet Union was jamming these broadcasts. There were special radio stations around Russian borders, Soviet borders, that been jamming on the same frequencies. What this troll farm, this agency does, it jams messages. Sometimes amplifies messages they want to hear, but normally they jam messages. And then they tried to export it to United States, I mean, and so on. They had some successful operations, but again, I mean, this is very difficult to maintain it and to get into some very specific areas of fear and so on that you can exploit. I mean, before we came here, I just reminded the story about Soviet active measures in 80s, in 60s, 70s, and 80s, when Soviet intelligence was really faking the news stories to make them distributed in the foreign media. And the most famous one is about AIDS being invented at Fort Derrick by American biological weapon specialists in order to kill black people separately. And that got picked up, especially in the third world, especially in Africa, because it was so racially determined. And Soviets were pushing it really hard because they needed kind of a revenge for some of, like for example, for failing Afghanistan operation. And in 1987, actually it was George Bush father, who met Gorbachev when I think he was president-elect at this moment. And he told Gorbachev that if Soviet Union would not stop this campaign, United States stopped supplying insulin And at this moment, Soviet Union was 100% dependent on American insulin. And the next day, all the stories disappeared. So that's real trolling. That's the real one. But in a present form, this what we call Russian trolls are semi-independent. I mean, Putin cannot tell them stop being anti-American. Now support Trump. They're not that controlled.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about trolls in Russia. You know, I think it's much more tied to this idea of like kind of astroturfing, or the idea that if you say something, a bunch of trolls will appear in the comments saying, you know, you're wrong, you're you know, spreading conspiracy theories or whatever, and it's much more about like kind of suppressing or manipulating information on the internet, versus I think in the US it's about kind of harassing, about kind of being outrageous, about you know, jamming the conversation, but also it's more of a like performance or something.
It's bringing emotions.
Right.
It's bringing negative emotions. Russian trolls really don't care about emotions.
Right. It's much more utilitarian.
Yeah,
They're just trying to
utilitarian.
And I think it's interesting, actually. Like, I would say that now the Russian definition is kind of seeping into the U.S. And I think when people are talking about trolls now, it's much more this idea of, you know, the kind of like sock puppet account, the kind of inauthentic, like kind of actor.
Dishonest actors rather than
somebody being a harasser, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but
There's
it's
a great story about some company that maintains fringe left and fringe right, like a kind of blogs at the same time, and they actually republish. I mean, just forgot it was yesterday or the day before yesterday was published. That they use the same content, but they change like few words in it, and it becomes fringe left, fringe right.
I mean, I just want to build on the conversation by, you know, we Vasily, in your own writing, and you've referenced it, you described this like typically sloppy Russian style of doing things, and you don't think that the Russian government, like the way that we're thinking about it is like, oh, Putin is like has this master plan, and you know all of these are all deployed at his design, and yet, however it's coming into being, these trolls and the kind of disinformation or the blockages of information, he likes it. It's good for Putin. So Putin is not distancing himself from it. I guess my question is, what does Putin want?
Doesn't use internet.
But does
at all.
What,
I mean,
what,
I honestly speaking.
Yeah, but what does Russia have to gain from this? Like from what we're describing here, like this sort of confusion internet. Does Russia want anything, or is it just happening and it happens to be from Russia?
Well, I think here in terms of political goals that Russia and Putin may pursue with this is the real trolling in American style. I mean, bringing emotions into certain type of discourse, making people harassed, making people kind of humiliated in response to something that happened 25 years ago. Like, I mean, first thing that you'll figure out if you go into Russian media space, even Russian English media space, that on every argument that American press or American politicians made against Russia today, they say, "And you bombed Belgrade." It was quite a while ago. It was 3 presidents ago. You started war in Iraq. It was 4 presidents ago, and it's a completely different set of people now. But now we want you to answer for that. I mean, Europe already forgot about that, and Russians maintain this because that's for them a feeling that when they bring these wrongdoings, or I mean some not really nice episodes in American history, that Americans are harassed with that.
Well, I guess you were kind of saying also though, like, I'm curious about your thoughts. You know, like what is the actual goal of, like, for example, Russia Today, right? You know, people who work for Russia Today. What are they trying to achieve? And you know, because I think that is something that is often put into the context of trolling, right? Of that it's that kind of above ground.
Well, first, I mean, people who currently operate Russia Today, and actually who operated Russia Today, RT and Russia Today for all these years, was to get a lot of money. I mean, the total budget for those, I mean, Russia Today was created in 2005, so for this nearly 12 years, they soaked about $3 billion from Russian budget. I mean, it's a very lush life. Technically, what they achieved, they created a channel, they have some distribution. This is not really something popular. And as a broadcast operation, it's really weak. I mean, you cannot find any serious ratings in any country where RT works. If you look at the Sputnik and other side projects that they created, it's a really minuscule media. Like RT altogether, RT.com, has about 100-something million viewers monthly as a website. Only 15% of them come from America. So it's about probably 25 million American visits to RT during.
Not even users.
Not
visits.
even users,
Yeah.
visits. I mean, it's not users. And it's probably, you have to divide it by 6 usually. So, and then you compare it to Drudge Report, which has about 3 billion.
Right.
And then just, let's speak about Russian propaganda. Or Breitbart, which has 1 billion. And yes,
And
RT...
they want something very concrete, right?
There is no doubt that RT somehow participates in these networks. They verify, amplify certain stories. Sometimes they are a source of the story that is being picked up by alt-right or whatever. I mean, even legacy media sometimes pick up Russian story that is completely uncorroborated and unsubstantiated, and then start to amplify it. But the biggest problem is that in my opinion, I mean, this overestimation of RT and Sputnik influence is that, well, for the first time since the moment when Brits got United States into Second World War, somebody maintains persistent media operation on your soil. This is very unusual for America. And this is well known. Yeah, the Brits conducted a long PR operation to bring Americans into war. So that's exactly the same thing.
So Russia Today might just be a huge graft by the people who are running Russia Today.
Yeah, and
I mean that's interesting because in talking to people about trolling in Russia, I talked to this one guy who runs a troll operation, and I was just like, okay, so why is this such a thing? And he's like, well, honestly, it's because all these troll operators are kind of good at like scamming the people above them into thinking that this was actually useful and working, when really they're just like, able to show these like very impressive metrics to these like clueless, politicians to be like, look, we sent 1 million tweets, we got you 100,000 followers, even though it's just such like so crude and kind of useless. But because this is all kind of being done on behalf of these people who don't know anything about the internet, it seems very impressive. And so he was trying to say that this is kind of just a giant scam, and that any actual effects are just like kind of. Yeah.
So we're at time, but it sounds like the sort of concluding statement here is that this is all one huge troll on all of us, and we should calm down a little bit about it.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
Well, we have to use our critical thinking always.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you both so much for
thank you.
educating and theorizing the web.